Joining me now, Democratic Congressman from Massachusetts, our friend Seth Moulton. He is a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, always good to have you on the show, so let's get into this. I want your reaction to the Senate confirming Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. And did your Republican colleagues take the accusations against him seriously?
It's a sad day for our military, for our Department of Defense. We've never had a less qualified Secretary of Defense than Pete Hegseth. And he's not just unqualified because he has no experience running a large organization, because the last time he ran a nonprofit, he ran it into financial ruin. He's unqualified because he's morally unqualified to lead our troops, to tell our troops that it's worth risking their lives for things. He's someone who has consistently injected politics into our military, something that is sacred to the United States to keep separate. Military and politics don't mix. When I served with Marines in Iraq, it didn't matter what background they came from, what political party they voted for, who they liked to see in the next election. None of that mattered because lives were on the line. And yet Pete Hegseth has literally written the book on putting politics into the military. So what we should be doing is praising the 3 GOP senators who actually had the political courage to do the right thing. Because I know a lot of others, people like Dave McCormick and Joni Ernst, both veterans themselves, who absolutely knew better, knew that Pete Hegseth was morally unqualified to serve as Secretary of Defense, and yet they were more scared of Donald Trump, and so they voted for him.
This from a man who was in the Marines. You did 4 tours of duty in Iraq. I'm curious, when you talk about those Republican colleagues that knew better, were there whispers admitting they knew better? But to your point, they were too afraid to go up publicly against Donald Trump. And let me also add that Pete Hegseth has denied all the allegations against him, so I want to go on the record for that. But did you hear Republicans say, we shouldn't be voting for him, but...
Great. So Pete Hegseth is a good liar because he denies all these allegations. That's great. But yes, of course there were whispers. I mean, Joni Ernst was public with her concerns. She said initially that she wouldn't support him. He presented no evidence to the contrary, nothing to really allay her concerns. In fact, as the confirmation process went forward, more and more allegations emerged along the same lines. Where there's smoke, there's fire here. It's not like one woman accused him of sexual assault. There were multiple allegations from multiple people, including people he had relationships with, and yet Joni just caved. And that's really sad because I know her. I know she knows better. It was a very disappointing moment for me as a fellow veteran to see people put aside their principle, their political courage, just because they were afraid that Donald Trump would attack them in a primary. And that's what's going on here. That's exactly what's going on.
Here's a question. It's a sobering one. If there is a military emergency, are you confident the new Secretary of Defense will know how to handle it?
No. Of course not. I mean, remember when Tammy Duckworth asked him about, just what are the Asian nations in ASEAN, an incredibly important organization in the South Pacific, because that's where the greatest threat of a war erupting is, over Taiwan, something that could literally start World War III. He knew nothing about it. He doesn't know anything about this stuff. He served a little bit in the military, sometimes in a reserve status, and he's spent a career trying to inject politics into our DOD as a Fox News commentator. All right. The reason why Trump wants someone like this in the Secretary of Defense position is because he can identify with someone who's a fellow perpetrator of sexual assault, who has no moral principles, someone whose loyalty is not to the United States or to the Constitution, but just to whoever gives him a job. In other words, Trump has found a stooge. That's what Pete Hegseth is. And that's not good for our troops.
Donald Trump's national security advisor and your former colleague on the Armed Services Committee, Mike Waltz, sent home 160 National Security Council aides this week as they conduct a review of personnel. And a source tells NBC News the goal is to ensure the NSC is staffed with individuals committed to fulfilling President Trump's agenda. You released a statement. Give me your response to this news.
Now, Alex, let me be fair here, because Mike Waltz actually, I believe, is a good American. He's a good veteran. He served honorably, and he knows the right thing to do here. But again, he's just caving to Donald Trump. It is not safe for our nation to send home all the national security staff, especially during a presidential transition when we don't have all the formal folks installed yet. And therefore, this staff that works behind the scenes every single day to keep our nation safe, to respond to crises, to anticipate things that are coming, to say that, oh, there's going to be a missile launch from North Korea, but they're not shooting at us, they're practicing, so therefore we don't have to initiate a nuclear war in response. I mean, these are really critical jobs that these folks do every single day. And Walz just sent them home? Because of what? Because of politics? Because he wants to make sure that their work is aligned with Trump administration's politics? How about putting the country and our national security first?
So as we discuss national security, I'm curious your reaction to Trump pardoning the January 6th rioters that includes violent offenders.
They're just criminals. I mean, Alex, how would you feel if, I was actually just in my small town, 20,000 people where I grew up, right? And I was thinking about if we had a bunch of people who assaulted cops, who tried to kill cops, were convicted and put in prison for 18, 20 or more years, and then they just were released and walking around town. How would I feel? Would I feel good about having my kids walking down the street in that town? No. How do I feel about bringing my kids, my two daughters, to the Capitol now, where Daddy works, knowing that Oath Keepers and Proud Boys are roaming around our Capitol? And they have been the past week. I mean, as soon as they got out of prison, they were roaming around the Capitol, looking for some of the same people they assaulted on January 6th. Does that make anyone feel good? No, this is supposed to be a country of laws, where you respect the law, where no one is above the law, where you don't release people from prison for politics. That's what Trump did.
Congressman Seth Moulton, always appreciate your time with us, and I do so again today. Thank you.